I never meant for it to happen. If you told me 6 months ago that I'd betray the one person who'd been by my side through every heartbreak, every disaster, I would have laughed in your face. But the truth? One look changed everything. It was at a dinner party. My best friend, Claire, had invited me over to her home for what I thought would be a casual Friday evening, wine, laughter, maybe some badly played board games. I wasn't expecting to meet him. Daniel. Her husband. He was nothing like I'd imagined. Claire always spoke of him with casual affection, but she never lingered on details. I pictured someone ordinary, safe, maybe even a little dull. But when I stepped into their warmly lit kitchen, he turned, smiled, and I swear the ground tilted beneath me. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of storm clouds right before the rain, Daniel had a presence that drew you in before you could think to look away. And when he shook my hand, his touch lingered just a fraction too long. That was all it took. The world we lived in. Claire had been my closest friend for over a decade. We'd survived college together, rented tiny apartments, cried over men who weren't worth our tears. She was the sister I'd chosen. I'd been in and out of relationships, never finding that spark that made me feel alive. Claire, meanwhile, had married Daniel 3 years ago in what seemed like a whirlwind romance. From the outside, they were perfect. Inside, I had no idea. During dinner, Daniel and I found ourselves sitting next to each other. Claire was busy pouring wine for another guest when he leaned slightly toward me. "So, how come I've never met you before tonight?" His voice was low, smooth, almost teasing. I smiled awkwardly. "I've been busy. Life gets in the way." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe Claire's been keeping you all to herself." My chest tightened. It was an innocent comment on the surface, but there was something in his tone, something that told me he was paying attention in a way I didn't expect. Over the next 2 hours, I found myself stealing glances at him. I told myself it was harmless, he was my best friend's husband. Completely off limits. But when his hand brushed mine as he passed me a plate, my heart skipped. When our eyes met across the table, it was like the room fell away. By the end of the night, I knew I was in trouble. As I left, Daniel walked me to the door. Claire was still inside, laughing with her guests. "It was nice to meet you," he said, his gaze lingering. "You too." I turned to go, but his voice stopped me. "You have the most complicated eyes. Like they're hiding something." I froze. When I looked back, he was smiling faintly, but his eyes were searching mine, as if he could see the thoughts I didn't dare speak aloud. I went home that night with my heart pounding, telling myself it was nothing. Just a moment. Just a look. But deep down, I knew better. The rain had softened, turning into a mist that hung in the air, making every streetlight glow like it was wrapped in glass. The park was quiet except for the sound of dripping leaves. Daniel's presence felt heavier than the damp air, his nearness both comforting and suffocating. He stepped closer, close enough for me to feel the faint heat radiating from his body despite the chill. His voice was low, almost drowned by the rain. "Tell me," he murmured, "that you haven't thought about me." I swallowed hard, my breath catching. "Daniel, we can't do this." His eyes searched mine, like he was trying to read the truth in them. "That's not an answer." I admitted finally, the words burning as they left my lips. Something in him shifted, an invisible barrier cracking. He reached up, brushing a wet strand of hair from my face, his fingertips lingering against my skin. It was such a simple gesture, but my knees felt weak. "You're dangerous," I whispered. "I think you like dangerous," he replied with a faint, knowing smile. We stood there for a long moment, the world around us disappearing. I knew I should have walked away, but instead, I let myself be drawn closer. His hand slid to the back of my neck, and before I could stop him, or myself, his lips were on mine. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant, almost like he was asking permission. But the moment I responded, it deepened, pulling me under like a current. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the rain anymore. When we finally broke apart, I could barely breathe. "This is wrong," I said again, but my voice lacked conviction. "I know," he said. "But I don't want to stop." The next morning, I tried to pretend it never happened. I went about my routine, smiling when my best friend, Claire, called me to talk about the dress she'd just bought for an upcoming event. I listened, I laughed in the right places, but every word felt like a lie. Because while she spoke about him casually, about her husband, I was thinking about the way he'd kissed me in the rain. The guilt was sharp, but underneath it was something worse, longing. That evening, Daniel texted again. "Daniel, dinner. Just us. One last time before we forget this ever happened." I stared at the screen for a long time. Every sensible part of me screamed, "Don't go." But the truth was, I didn't want to forget. I met him at a small restaurant on the edge of town where no one we knew would see us. The lighting was dim, the air warm with the smell of grilled food. He was already there, sitting at a corner table, his tie loosened, his hair slightly messy. "You came," he said with a half-smile. "Just to talk," I reminded him. We talked, at first about safe topics, work, movies, the weather, but the air between us was charged, every glance and smile loaded with something unsaid. Halfway through dinner, his hand brushed mine under the table. It was deliberate. My breath hitched. After dinner, neither of us suggested going home. Instead, we walked along the quiet streets, our shoulders brushing. And then, without warning, he pulled me into an alleyway and kissed me again, harder this time, like he was done pretending. I didn't stop him. By the time I returned home that night, my lipstick was smudged, my heart racing, and my conscience screaming. I told myself it had to end. But deep down, I already knew it wouldn't. Because once you've crossed the line, there's no going back. The rain had been falling since late afternoon, tapping against the windows in a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Maya sat at her kitchen table, trying to focus on the book in her hands, but the words blurred and danced on the page. She hadn't heard from Daniel all day, not a single text, not a single call, and she hated how much that bothered her. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him. She told herself it didn't matter. But deep down, she knew the truth, she had been counting the hours. It wasn't love, she told herself. It was a mistake, a dangerous attraction, something she could still stop. But every time she closed her eyes, she felt his hands, his voice, his eyes on her as if she belonged to him. The chime of her phone made her heart jolt. "Daniel, meet me tonight. No excuses." Her throat tightened. Tonight. The word pulsed in her head. She knew what it meant. This wouldn't be like the stolen kisses in empty hallways or the quiet moments in his car. This time, he was asking for something bigger, something she wouldn't be able to take back. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could say no. She could end this before it spiraled further out of control. She could save her friendship with Claire, save her own dignity, save her marriage to a man who had never once hurt her. But instead, she typed, "Where?" The address he sent wasn't to his home. It was a hotel in the city. The kind of place with dim golden lights in the lobby and heavy curtains that made you forget the outside world existed. She almost didn't go. She sat in her car for 15 minutes, watching the rain blur the city lights. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles ached. She told herself she could turn back. She told herself this was the last chance she'd get to make the right choice. And then she stepped out into the rain. Daniel was waiting in the lobby, leaning against the marble pillar as if he owned the place. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his hair slightly damp, giving him an almost dangerous softness. When he saw her, he didn't smile. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes was enough to make her feel like the floor had shifted beneath her feet. "Come with me," he said simply. The elevator ride was silent, but charged. She could hear her own breathing, feel the pounding in her chest. He stood close, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne, mixed with the rain on his skin. When the doors opened, he took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm. He led her down the hallway without a word, as if afraid that if they spoke, they might break whatever spell had brought them here. Inside the room, the city was a blur of wet lights beyond the window. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioner and the rain against the glass. Daniel closed the door, and for a moment they just stood there, staring at each other. "You could still walk away," he said, his voice low, almost a challenge. Her heart was racing so fast it hurt. "I know," she whispered. But she didn't move toward the door. He stepped closer, his fingers brushing a strand of damp hair from her cheek. "If we do this, Maya, there's no going back." She swallowed hard. "We crossed that line the moment we started." What happened next was both inevitable and unthinkable. His kiss was nothing like the stolen moments before. This was deeper, hungrier, as if he had been holding back for weeks and had finally let go. His hands were sure, steady, and every touch burned through the thin fabric of her clothes. She felt the weight of the choice she was making, but she also felt the rush of something she couldn't name, a pull that was stronger than her guilt, stronger than her fear. Time blurred. The rain outside became a whisper. The city, her marriage, her friendship with Claire, all of it faded into the background until there was only him, and the heat between them. Hours later, she lay tangled in the hotel sheets, the city lights painting patterns across his bare shoulders. Daniel was watching her, his eyes tracing her face as if trying to memorize it. "You're thinking too much," he murmured. "I can't help it," she said softly. "I don't know how to switch it off." "You don't have to," he replied. "Just stay here with me tonight. That's all I'm asking." But they both knew it wasn't all he was asking. And they both knew she'd give him more. She woke before dawn, the room dim and quiet. Daniel was still asleep beside her, his hand resting on her hip as if claiming her even in his dreams. She slipped out of bed, wrapping herself in the hotel robe, and stood by the window. The streets below were slick with rain, empty except for a lone taxi gliding past. She wondered what Claire was doing at that moment. Sleeping, probably. Curled up next to her husband, believing her life was safe, her marriage unshakable. Maya's chest tightened. She had crossed the line. And there was no way back. When Daniel stirred and opened his eyes, there was no regret in them. Only that same dangerous calm. "You're mine now," he said. It wasn't a question. And the terrifying part was, she didn't disagree. That morning, as she left the hotel, she caught sight of something that froze her blood. Across the street, half hidden under the awning of a coffee shop, a man was watching her. He wasn't Daniel. He wasn't a stranger, either. It was her husband. And he saw everything. The morning light was merciless. It sliced through the blinds of the hotel room, turning every wrinkle in the sheets into a spotlight on what they had done. Mia lay there, her body still warm from the night before, but her heart was pounding for a different reason now. The scent of him was still on her skin. The marks on her neck were fresh reminders of her betrayal. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, already dressed. He wasn't looking at her. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped together, as if he was replaying every moment in his mind, weighing the cost. She wrapped the sheet around herself and whispered, "We have to go before anyone notices." He finally looked at her, and his voice was low but sharp. "Do you think they're stupid, Mia? People notice everything. The way you look at me. The way I look at you. Your best friend's not blind." Her stomach twisted. She had been trying to convince herself they were careful, that every glance and every touch had been hidden under the chaos of gatherings and late-night talks. But now, under the harsh light of day, she knew he was right. They left the hotel separately, Daniel taking the elevator first, Mia following 15 minutes later. Every step through the lobby felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. The receptionist's polite smile seemed almost knowing. When she finally got home, Claire, her best friend, was sitting in the kitchen. Coffee mug in hand. Watching her. "You're up early," Mia said, forcing a smile. Claire tilted her head. "Couldn't sleep. You disappeared last night. Where were you?" The question was casual, but Mia felt the undertone. She could lie. She could say she went for a late drive, or that she couldn't sleep and wandered around the city. But her mouth went dry. "I just needed some air," Mia said, shrugging. "Cleared my head." Claire sipped her coffee slowly, her eyes never leaving Mia's face. "Right." She didn't push further, but the silence between them felt heavier than words. The following days were a blur of stolen moments and mounting paranoia. Daniel would text her in the middle of the day, his messages both thrilling and dangerous. "Daniel, need to see you. Tonight." Mia, not safe. "Daniel, it's never safe." That's the point. Each time they met, the passion was fiercer, as if they knew the clock was ticking on whatever this was. But afterward, the guilt pressed harder on Mia's chest. At a Sunday barbecue, the tension finally cracked. Claire was laughing with friends when Daniel walked past Mia, brushing his hand ever so slightly against hers. It was barely a touch, but her breath caught. And Claire saw it. Mia knew because her best friend's smile faltered, just for a second, and her eyes shifted from Daniel to Mia like she was connecting invisible dots. Later that evening, as Mia was helping clean up, Claire joined her in the kitchen. "You and Daniel seem close lately," Claire said casually, wiping down the counter. Mia's grip on the dish towel tightened. "He's your husband." "Of course we talk." Claire smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Talk. Right." She leaned closer. "Just remember, Mia, some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed." It wasn't an accusation. Not yet. But it was a warning. After that night, paranoia became Mia's constant shadow. She started avoiding Claire's gaze, worried it might see too much. She replayed every interaction, every glance, every word, wondering which one had betrayed them. Daniel, however, didn't seem rattled. If anything, he became bolder. He would stand a little too close when Claire was in the other room. Whisper something into Mia's ear that made her knees weak, right before stepping back like nothing had happened. One evening, they met at a quiet bar on the edge of town. Daniel arrived first, waiting in a corner booth where dim lighting hid his expression from the rest of the world. "You're pulling away from me," he said as soon as she sat down. "I'm scared," Mia admitted. "Claire is starting to suspect." He leaned forward. "Then let her suspect. We've gone too far to pretend there's nothing here." Her heart pounded as he reached across the table and took her hand, in public. She snatched it back. "You're not the one who's going to lose everything if this comes out," she said, her voice breaking. He studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You think I wouldn't lose her? You think this wouldn't destroy me too? Mia, you're worth the risk." It should have made her feel wanted. Instead, it terrified her. The final straw came a week later. Claire announced she was going out for the evening with friends. An hour after she left, Daniel showed up at Mia's door. She tried to tell him no, that it was too dangerous. But the moment his hands touched her, resistance melted. They ended up on her couch, tangled in each other, lost in the rush of wanting what they shouldn't have. They didn't hear the car pull up. They didn't hear the front door unlock. It wasn't until Mia froze, hearing the unmistakable sound of Claire's voice calling her name, that reality slammed back in. Daniel was on his feet instantly, grabbing his jacket. "Bathroom, now," he hissed, shoving her toward the hallway. Mia's pulse was in her ears as she hid, listening to Claire's footsteps move through the house. She was talking about forgetting her phone in her bag. And then there was silence. Too much silence. When Mia stepped out, Claire was standing in the living room. Alone. But her eyes were cold, and her voice was like glass breaking. "Who else is here, Mia?" The air in the room felt thicker than it had any right to be, like the walls were leaning in, listening. My fingers tightened around my phone until my knuckles ached, the glass screen smudged with sweat from my palms. The message stared back at me, simple and devastating. "We need to talk. I know everything." From her. My best friend. The woman who had been in my life since I was 17. The one who had stood next to me at every milestone, whose secrets I kept, whose laughter had been stitched into my happiest memories. The woman whose husband I had. God. I couldn't even finish the thought. I sat frozen on the bed, my legs tucked under me, the steady hum of the ceiling fan above doing nothing to cool the heat rising in my chest. For weeks, I'd been convincing myself we could keep this buried. That if we were careful enough, clever enough, disciplined enough, the truth would remain locked away where it belonged. But lies were fragile things. They didn't just crack. They splintered. And once they started breaking, there was no controlling the way the pieces cut you. My phone buzzed again. "Don't avoid me. I'm on my way." Panic shot through me. She was coming here. I jumped to my feet, pacing the room, running my hands through my hair. My mind replayed every moment, every risk, every slip of carelessness. Was it the way he'd looked at me in public once? Was it that night at their house when she'd walked in earlier than expected and found us sitting too close? Or had he told her himself? My heart pounded so hard it felt like my ribs were vibrating. I wanted to call him, her husband, but my fingers refused to dial. What would I even say? That his wife was coming to confront me? That she knew? That I was terrified? He'd always been the calm one. The one who made me believe we could handle anything. But in that moment, I was alone with my fear, and it was suffocating. A sharp knock echoed through my apartment, loud and commanding. My stomach dropped. She didn't wait for me to open the door, she pushed it wide the second I unlocked it. She stood there, eyes blazing, lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't look like the woman I knew. She looked like someone who had rehearsed this moment in her head and was ready to burn the truth into the open. "Close the door," she said, her voice like glass, sharp, cold, dangerous. I obeyed. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her eyes searched mine, not with curiosity, but with the kind of certainty that left no room for denial. "How long?" she asked. The words hit harder than if she'd screamed. My mouth opened, then closed. My pulse roared in my ears. I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect myself. But something in her expression, the betrayal etched into every line of her face, made it impossible to pretend. "A few months," I whispered. Her jaw tightened. "Months," she repeated, as if the word itself was poison. She laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to watch your best friend and your husband exchange glances like you're invisible? To realize that the two people you trusted most have been sharing parts of themselves you thought belonged to you?" Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't move toward her. She wouldn't have let me. "It wasn't supposed to," I began, but she cut me off with a raised hand. Don't you dare tell me it wasn't supposed to happen. Do you think that makes it better?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't let it weaken her. The silence between us was deafening. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought about the first time it happened, the night he kissed me when she was out of town, the way we'd both told ourselves it was just a moment of weakness. But then there was the second time. The third. The way I stopped counting because counting made it real. "You know what hurts the most," she said finally. "I always defended you. When people said you were too close to him, I told them they were crazy. When I saw things that didn't make sense, I told myself you'd never do that to me." My throat tightened. "I didn't plan to." "Stop saying that," she shouted, her voice breaking into something raw. "You had plenty of chances to stop. You didn't." Her hands shook, but her gaze didn't waver. She stepped closer, her words low and deliberate now. "I loved you like a sister," she said. "And you were sleeping with my husband." It was like a knife turning in my chest. There were things I could have said. I could have told her about the nights he came to me first. About how he claimed their marriage was already over. About how he made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. But none of that would make me less guilty. None of that would make me less of a traitor. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. Whatever she saw made her expression darken even further. She turned back to me, her voice trembling with something more than anger now. "He's outside," she said. I froze. "Here?" "Yes. And you're going to tell him everything. Right now. In front of me." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made my skin crawl. Then the door opened, and he stepped inside like he belonged there, like this wasn't about to be the moment everything imploded. His eyes moved between us, reading the tension instantly. "You told her," he said to me. "I didn't have to," she spat. "I'm not blind." For a moment, no one spoke. Then he exhaled and moved toward me, but she stepped between us, blocking his path. I stood there, my hands shaking, feeling like I was watching two people I cared about set fire to everything around us. And I was the match. "You need to leave," she said to him. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. "Not until I explain." Her eyes narrowed. "Explain? You think there's an explanation that makes this okay?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to me. "Do you want me to leave?" My voice was barely audible. I don't know." That hesitation, that tiny crack, was all she needed. Her face went cold. "I can't even look at you right now," she said to me, stepping back toward the door. "Either you end this, or I end us. As friends. As anything." She walked out without another word. He stayed behind, looking at me like the decision was mine to make. But I knew, deep down, that whatever I chose, something precious was already gone. Her voice, so familiar, so safe, said softly, "Babe, are you?" Then she stopped. I turned. She stood frozen, her grocery bag slipping from her hands, the apples rolling across the floor like tiny red alarms. She didn't scream at first. She just stared. The shock was worse than any shouting could have been. "How could you?" she asked, her voice cracking like fragile glass. I opened my mouth, to explain, to lie, I don't know which, but nothing came out. He tried to step forward, saying her name, but she put her hand up like a barrier. "Don't touch me." That was the moment I realized nothing would ever be the same again. The fallout. The next hours blurred into fragments. Sophie crying. Him pacing, swearing he didn't mean for it to happen. Me, sitting there in silence, knowing that no matter what we said, there was no version of this where we were forgiven. By midnight, she told me to get out of her house. She didn't yell it, she said it quietly, almost politely, which somehow hurt more. The next day, everyone knew. Mutual friends stopped answering my calls. My social media became a war zone. My name wasn't just mine anymore, it was attached to words like homewrecker, snake, traitor. He messaged me once that week. "I miss you. But I can't lose her completely." I didn't reply. Because that was the truth of it, I was never going to win. I was the thrill, the mistake, the dangerous secret, but she was the life he had chosen. Aftermath. The days after were quiet. Too quiet. I deleted all our messages. Burned the scarf he had left in my apartment. Blocked his number. But at night, when the city was asleep, I would lie in bed and think about the way his hand fit perfectly against mine. About the way we both knew we were wrong, yet couldn't stop. I never saw Sophie again. She moved out of the city within a month. Our entire friendship, decades of laughter, secrets, and sisterhood ended with a single choice I could never undo. 1 year late. A year later, I saw them. It was at a train station. She was standing beside him, her hand looped through his arm. She looked healthier. He looked older. I stayed hidden behind a pillar, watching them laugh at something only they understood. When they boarded the train, she leaned in and kissed him, not a passionate kiss, but the kind that spoke of comfort and forgiveness. And I realized, she had taken him back. They disappeared into the carriage, and I was left standing there, the sound of the departing train echoing in my chest. People think the worst part of betrayal is being caught. It's not. The worst part is living with the knowledge that life moves on without you, that the people you once broke will eventually heal, but you'll always be the scar. And as the rain began again, I walked away, knowing this was my punishment, not losing him, but losing myself.